I'll tell you this. Anybody that comes to you and just wants to pose it as an easy answer for you, this is your first sign. This is a sign for you to know that that person doesn't know what they're talking about. Assalamu alaikum. Got a question through my Facebook page, the link for which is in the description box for those of you who would like to ask questions. And this one comes from Sonia. Dear Muhammad, I wanted to ask you, is secularism against Islam? It's a pretty nice short question, direct straight to the point, but it has a lot that is involved in it. It sounds really easy. Is secularism against Islam? Sounds pretty straightforward. But it's not so straightforward, because this question involves some assumptions. The thing is, guys and Sonia, we live in a world in which Western civilization is really the dominant one. When it comes to education, when it comes to valuations of truth, when it comes to even the concepts of a lot of things that we just take for granted. Concepts that we just talk about without really questioning the root of from which they come forth. So when you ask, is secularism against Islam, you have to recognize that when you live in a world in which Western civilization is the one that dominates, right? Western thought, post-enlightenment thought, modernism, postmodernism, all of these things. Secularism comes from that. And when it comes to Western civilization, we have to accept that, or we have to recognize that this is coming from a post-Christian era, a post kind of Catholic Church, or the church in control of everything, period. And so when they talk about secularism, that concept is a byproduct, or is birthed from Christian kind of background. From a Muslim perspective, we have to question these concepts first before we talk about, is this against that? You know, you have the people that say like secularism is compatible with Islam because, and then they list off all of these things that the Prophet ﷺ did, or the Khulafa did, that would guarantee kind of equal treatment under the law and freedom of religion, all this stuff, without really taking into account other factors involved in Muslim governance and how Muslims have done it, and the differences, by the way, that came into play. Our history is not so straightforward that you can just read it in a linear progression like that. The period of the Prophet ﷺ is different from the period of the Khulafa. We're talking about the first four caliphs, Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali radiallahu anhum. And then the period after that, the Umayyads, which in Arabic we talk about the Khilafah al-Umayyah. Khilafah, caliphs, that's just kind of a term that's used, but it's not a reality in the same way that the caliphs after the Prophet ﷺ were. A better description of it would be a dynasty, and they ruled in a particular fashion. And then the Abbasids and the Fatimites and the Mamluks and all of these different governing kind of systems that were in place, and how Muslims governed. It's not so simple to just speak about what is compatible with Islam versus what is against Islam. And the ones that come in and say it's against Islam, and then they cite you a couple of verses, in al-hukmu illa lillah, or like rulership is only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or like final legislation is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's, or talking about whoever rules by other than what Allah had revealed, then those are the disbelievers, those are the wrongdoers, those are the ones who are in manifest misguidance. I mean, you can quote these verses out of context, and if I were to bring up a story about Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu using these verses and using other verses to show that the explanation is not so simple and straightforward, you come up with a very complex kind of picture that is very difficult. It's actually impossible to summarize in a very short video. But the reason I brought this question up is just to show you that it's very easy for us to pose questions. I mean, is secularism against Islam? I can tell you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Hud tells us about the people of Shu'aib, Ashabu Layka, who asked Shu'aib radiallahu anhu, قالوا يا شعيب أصلاتك تأمرك. O Shu'aib, the people of Shu'aib asked him, does your prayer command you to أن نترك ما يعبد آباؤنا, that we leave what our forefathers used to worship, أو أن نفعل في أموالنا ما نشاء, or that we should not be able to do what we wish or what we please to do with our money? In other words, Are you coming here with legislation from above to tell us how we should do our transactions? I mean, if I quote you that verse just by itself like that, then you would have an issue with regards to legislation and governing. And then the question poses itself, well, how do we deal with this? If secularism understood under which concept, by the way? Are we talking secularism understood under the idea of, say, United States, Canada type of secularism? Or are you talking about laicism of the French type of kind, which goes beyond separation of church and state, separation of religion and state? I mean, it's an easy question to pose, but it's a very complex thing to get into. So the short answer is yes and no. In some ways you can find that it is compatible, in other ways it's not. What I would recommend you should do is, if this is a thing that you're deeply interested in studying and understanding, is to take the time, sit down, find yourself a teacher who you can spend some time with, and study legislative law. Study fiqh and look into all of the different nuances of it, and usul al-fiqh, and actually delve into this matter. But it's not a simple, I'll tell you this, anybody that comes to you and just wants to pose it as an easy answer for you, this is your first sign. This is a sign for you to know that that person doesn't know what they're talking about. And that's really all I can tell you about this question. So thanks, Sonia, for asking the question. Sorry I can't give you a simple, straightforward answer. I know it's through social media and you're looking for a straightforward answer probably, but I just wanted to relate to you how difficult it is to give straightforward, simple, direct answers to some questions, despite how easy they might sound. At any rate, those of you who would like to ask more questions, link is in the description for my Facebook page. You can send me a message through there. If you don't have Facebook for whatever reason, you can send me a message, I think, through YouTube. Some of you have been able to do that, so you can do that through YouTube. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.